Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Leah Nogueira. I'm Associate Professor of Agricultural Economics at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. This is a special presentation in the Center for Agricultural Profitability's webinar series, which typically happens every Thursday at noon Central Time. You can find an updated schedule, registrations, and an archive of all of our past seminars on our website at cap.unl.edu. Today, we are excited to partner with USDA's Risk Management Agency for a presentation of their Livestock Roadshow series. From beef to dairy to pork, being a livestock producer comes with unique and difficult challenges, and you want to make sure you know what options are available to best protect your operation. Buying a livestock insurance policy is one risk management option. Producers should always carefully consider how a policy will work in conjunction with their other risk management strategies to ensure the best possible outcomes. This webinar will cover updates and improvements to several livestock risk management products. We are excited to be joined by a panel of RMA experts. We have Cody McCann, Doug Piney, and Paul Gallagher are all with the Risk Management Agency in the Farm Production and Conservation Mission area. We're also joined by Colin Olson. He's the director of the Risk Management Agency's regional office in Topeka, Kansas.
Thanks, Leah. My name is Colin Olson. I'm the director of the Topeka Regional Office. Our office has 4 states responsibility: Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, and of course, Nebraska. And with me today, I've got, as Leah mentioned, Paul Gallagher is a senior specialist here in the regional office. And then I've got Doug Piney and Cody McCann are our national subject matter experts for our PRF, annual forage, and livestock programs. And without any further ado, I'll just hand it over to Doug Piney, and he can talk about annual forage and PRF.
Thanks, Colin. Let me get my slides up here. Okay, like Colin mentioned, I'm going to go over a couple of RMA's rainfall index products. One is pasture range land forage, and the other is annual forage. You know, looking back through history, I've just worked for RMA for like 4 years, but I've spent several years working with a sister agency, Farm Service Agency, and I was born and raised and still got a direct interest in livestock and grain operation in East Central Kansas. So over the years, the livestock producers didn't have a lot of options via maybe FSA programs or crop insurance products. So these products were developed to quantify forage losses in the event of less than average normal precipitation. We recognize that livestock producers function a little different than grain farmers in that they don't haul their hay to town. If they're a livestock producer, you put up hay, you get it to the edge of the field, maybe at the time that you're harvesting, and then get it to feed locations throughout for the wintertime months. So it's nothing that's taken across scales. There's no official bale count. And as far as grazing livestock, is to quantify grazing losses and maybe shorter grazing lengths. It may be lighter weight cattle coming off grass. It may mean a shorter or lower body condition score if you're grazing cow-calf pairs. But the first product that we're going to go over is, I'm going to call it PRF. And it seems like the government, we like to talk in acronyms. So pasture land forage, it's been a pilot program that's been around for several years. We've seen an increase.
Doug, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're just seeing your presenter view on the slides. I'm wondering if you could go up to display settings in your PowerPoint there and just swap the displays, and we'll see that full screen.
Let me try a different one here. Sorry about that, folks. Let me get a different presentation up. Okay, is that better?
Yep, looks great. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. So like I said, that we've seen a lot of increase in participation over the last 5 to 7 years with PRF. PRF is available in all contiguous 48 states. And in 2023, we insured 290 million acres. PRF, it is an area-based plan of insurance. So typically when we talk about area-based plans, we're talking about county boundaries. This is a little bit different in that the contiguous 48 states have been gridded. And these are square boxes basically that utilizes precipitation data. It looks at the historical precipitation data and compares it to the actual precipitation that was received within a 2-month period. PRF, it insures against a single loss, a peril, which is lack of precip. It covers perennial forages with the intended use of grazing and haying. Keep in mind insurance policies with the intended use of grazing. The insurable interest is the insurable interest in the livestock that are actually grazing that land. Another thing to note that as a producer, when you sign up for a PRF policy, you're going to state your intentions for that land at the time that you report the acres. And that's done up front. So at that time, you're stating how you intend to use it and that that land is suitable for your intended use. So some land could be hayed or grazed and some cannot. So make sure if you're reporting it for hay, that it's capable of being hayed. Same thing with grazing. Make sure that it's got the structures there to be able to be grazed. PRF, it utilizes a dollars per acre value that we refer to as a county-based value. And that's supposed to represent the average value of that forage in the county in which the land is located. The PRF policy itself, all insurance policies have what we call a sales closing date. So as a producer, that's the date in which you need to decide if you want the coverage. That is also the same date that you're going to need to report the acres. PRF, you don't have to insure all your acres of hay or grazing land, but you'll have to designate what acres that you do want to insure, and that's done at December 1st. The policy, it runs on a calendar year basis. It goes from January 1st through December 31st, and the crop year is divided into 11 2-month intervals. As a producer, you're going to have to select coverage in at least 2 2-month intervals, and those 2-month intervals is supposed to represent the time in which precipitation is most important to the type of grass that you're grazing in your particular operation and its location. Coverage level for the policy is 70 to 90%. Now, this coverage percent isn't a percent of a yield. It's a percent of the average or normal precipitation that's received in that grid area. The policy is subsidized, so producers can receive premium subsidies ranging from 51 to 59%. So as a result, out of pocket is 41 to 49%. And as your coverage level goes up, that subsidy level goes down accordingly. Like I mentioned, it does provide for coverage on a dollar per acre basis based on that county-based value, but it's not a perfect representation of what the forage may be worth in your eyes and your operation. So it allows you to deviate from that. You can go below it or go above it. So as a producer, you can decide how many dollars per acre coverage you really need. You can go as low as 60% or as high as 150% of that county-based value. Now, as far as the rainfall index portion of the policy, like I said, it is area-based. It's laid out in these grid boxes. The size of these grid boxes are basically 17 miles by 17 miles. That's like 0.25 degrees by 0.25 degrees. And these boxes, they don't stop and start at county boundaries or state lines. So it is important for you to locate your land and determine what grid it's in and what grid ID number represents that area. The weather data that RMA uses to drive this program comes from the weather experts. RMA doesn't collect any weather data. We simply receive the information from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or better known as NOAA, and we use the Climate Prediction Center data set that they collect and published. Now, this data set, it wasn't something that was developed especially for RMA. This is something that they have collected for many years. This is just the data set that we feel is the most accurate out there available to drive a program like this. Keep in mind the data set is multi-point. So that means NOAA gets us weather data from weather stations that's scattered throughout the contiguous 48 states. Depends on where you're located. Some areas have a lot of weather stations and some don't have many. So what it does, it locates, or what NOAA does, it locates at least 4 weather stations closest to the center of the grid. And that weather data is weighted based on the closest proximity to that grid. It could be located within the grid, but it could not be. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that even if a grid is located in your weather station is located in your grid, it's not going to be a one-for-one calculation of that data. It's going to interpolate other weather data from other weather stations. The deviation from normal precipitation dates back to 1948. So like I said, they've collected this weather data for many years. So we're comparing that historical data to the actual within that 2-month period and within that grid. Like I said, NOAA, they collect the data, they compute the grade calculations, they perform quality control processes, and then they release the data. There's 3 data types that they release, and RMA just uses 2 of those. We use the historical and the quality controlled. The quality controlled data is something that hasn't been used all the time. Probably within the last 5 to 7 years, we started using the quality controlled data, and that has resulted in a larger lag time between the end of the interval and the release of that data set. So we get common questions of, my interval ended 45 days ago and we still haven't released the data. And that's basically, we're waiting for NOAA to complete their quality control processes. And once they release it, then we grab that data and then computations are made to determine if indemnities are triggered and what those indemnities might be. Keep in mind that we just use the data. RMA doesn't make any changes. Many times producers, they see the real-time data, or we see agents contact us, reach out to us that it don't seem to be tracking, wondering if there's some type of error. So that 60-day window, although it does delay indemnity payments, it does allow time for us to check into situations. We encourage folks to get us weather data. We can't just go to NOAA and say so-and-so said that they didn't receive the rainfall that the real-time data says. It's not going to be an accurate reflection. Many times it's not reading individual rain gauges, but do some research, gather the weather data that you think supports your position, and we can send that to NOAA to have them include that in their quality control process to make sure that an error didn't happen for that particular interval. So although it does delay payments sometimes, it does allow producers to receive the most accurate weather information. Intervals, like I said, the year is broke up into 11 2-month intervals. This slide shows you a visual of what those intervals are. I mentioned you have to select at least 2 intervals for coverage. Those intervals cannot be overlapping. So that means if you notice the different shades of the boxes, you would have to skip over every other one if you wanted coverage for the entire calendar year, for example. In my area, if I think rainfall is important from March to June, I might select the March and April interval, and then I would need to skip down and select the May and June interval because the April-May interval would overlap the month of April. So it does allow some flexibilities. We're not telling you as a producer when rainfall is important. That's your decision for your situation, your grass type, and your operation. It allows flexibility. You have to select 2, but you can select multiple. And then once you select those intervals, it allows you to allocate the value of those amongst those that you selected. So the minimum value would be 10%, and depends on the grid. It can go as high as 60%, but you can weight those based on the months that you think are the most important. So that March, April, for my particular example, if I think that's the most important compared to the May, June, I might want to weight that a little heavier than my May, June. But that's a decision you as a producer can make. Indemnities, basically, it's pretty simple. The data drives indemnities. Since the only insurable loss is precipitation, we look at the data that NOAA releases. So we're comparing the quality control data to the historical. An example, if I select April-May interval, it has an average precip of 3 inches. And if I've got a 70% coverage, I'm insuring 2.1 inches of rainfall during that 2-month period. So in order for me to receive an indemnity, the final grid value would have to fall below that 2.1 inches in order for it to trigger an indemnity payment. So keep in mind, indemnities, they are interval specific as well as grid specific. So the more intervals you pick, the more opportunities possibly for indemnities to trigger. But you as a producer, that's your decision. If you want to select just 2 intervals, or if you want several intervals to scatter throughout the calendar year. The next product that I'm going to talk about is annual forage. There's a lot of similarities. The basic concept of annual forage to PRF. It's still quantifying forage losses, but it's looking at annually planted forages. It's an area-based plan, and it uses a lot of the similar or the same data set that PRF as far as the weather precipitation data is concerned. Annual forage, it isn't available everywhere. So this slide shows you the states in which it is available. We're in a region or going over these products in a region in which annual forage is available. And if it's available in a state, it's available in all the counties in the state. Like I mentioned, it is similar in that it is an area-based plan of insurance. It uses the exact same grid system that PRF does, and it uses the same precipitation data from NOAA, and we use the same data set, CPC. It still insures against a lack of a single peril, which is precipitation. It covers annually planted forages with the following intended uses. So not only haying and grazing, but it includes green chop, silage. Some folks have a combination of intended use, graze it for a while, pull cattle off, and then hay it. So that's an option. The grazing green chop option is also available. And the last one, it is pretty unique, and I've got a slide that I'll go into a little more detail about, but it is, since small grains can be grazed and then pull cattle off, we can also cover situations in which you're grazing the small grain for a while and then taking that crop on to grain harvest later. That's a unique opportunity, but we'll go into those details in a little bit here. It also uses, as far as annual forage, the policy uses the dollar value per acre. So there's county-based value. It obviously is different than PRF. And again, it's supposed to represent the average value of the forage in the particular county in which it's located. Annual forage policy is a little different than PRF. It doesn't coincide with the calendar year. Annual forages can be planted in the fall as well as spring or summer. So as a result, it overlaps the calendar year. The sales closing date for annual forage is July 15th. So again, that's the date in which you as a producer would need to sign up for coverage. Now note, that isn't the same date that you need to report the acres. It is a planted crop, so you don't report the acres until that crop is actually planted. The policy runs from August 1st through July 31st of the next calendar year. The crop year is divided into 12 growing seasons. So basically each month of that policy period represents a growing season, and then each growing season has 6 2-month intervals that coincide with that growing season. So of that growing season, you as a producer would need to select 2 or 3 intervals, and that's kind of dependent on the location and the growing season that you're in. So that is something that your agent can help you with once you get that crop planted. It provides coverage from 70 to 90%, just like PRF. It's subsidized the same percentiles. And again, as your coverage level goes up, the subsidy level goes down. It also provides a deviation from that county-based value. So you can insure as low as 60% and go as high as 150% of that CBV value for annual forage in the particular county that the crop is planted in. Like I mentioned, the 12 growing seasons, it's basically based on the date of planting of the crop. So once the crop is planted, you as a producer decide if you want coverage, and then if you want coverage, you have to make sure and get the acres reported. And then once you report the acres, coverage starts the month after the crop is planted. The planting dates coincide with the days of the month. So it goes from the first of the month to the end. And the acreage reporting date, you have 5 calendar days into the next month to get it planted. So an example, if I plant a small grain and on August 24th for growing season 1, my acreage reporting date for that crop is September 5th. So it's always 5 days into the month following the month in which the crop was planted. And again, that acreage reporting date is critical. If you miss it, you are not going to be able to get insurance under this product. This chart is actually posted in our rainfall index handbook. And I know as a producer, you probably don't on the computer and look at our policies and dig into them, but your agent can assist with that. But it is a handy chart to show planting months, and then not only what coverage is available, but the intervals that represent that growing season. So to me, it makes a lot of sense. You just go down to the month that you planted. It identifies what growing season it is. Again, if you plant in that month, you're eligible for coverage starting the next, as long as you get those acres reported to your agent. And then of those 6 available intervals with that growing season, you can make your selections as you see fit. Now, not all growing seasons are available everywhere. So as you can see on this slide, in Kansas, Colorado, and Nebraska, they've excluded growing seasons December and January. Basically identified in those months, probably you're not planting annual forages anyway. But if you decided to, or if there was a special year that the weather would even allow it, you couldn't receive coverage if you decided to plant during December or January. And in the Dakotas, they actually added the month of February as well. So December, January, and February, if you planted an annual forage crop, you couldn't receive coverage on those acres. Again, I've said it several times, acreage reporting is critical. Annual forage, you used to have to insure all of your acres. Now you do not. You report the acres that you want to insure. So it is important that you meet that acreage reporting deadline. If you miss it, you're not going to get coverage. Another important thing to note with annual forage is that you need to select what growing seasons that you may want coverage in at sales closing date. So sales closing date, if you remember, is July 15th. So on that date, you as a producer make the selection on what growing seasons that you may end up planting an annual forage in. Now, we know that you never know what the future holds and what Mother Nature is going to throw you. So it's okay to select every growing season if you want to, just to cover your bases. But just keep in mind, if you've never planted a small grain in the month of August before, and don't choose it, and if lo and behold you end up doing it, you're not going to be able to get coverage. So keep that in mind. At sales closing date, you do have to select what potential growing seasons that you may want coverage in. You still got to plant the crop and you still got to report it to get that coverage, but you need to select those growing season potential growing seasons up front. Since annual forage overlaps the calendar year, we recognize that there's crops that are planted in the fall for maybe spring grazing or early harvest. And then once that's completed, that land, most producers don't want land left open. If it's able to grow a crop and I can get some good out of it, I'm probably going to plant something else. So it's not uncommon in areas in which annual forage has coverage to plant more than one forage crop within the span of this policy. So the question is, when can you plant your second annual forage crop if you want coverage on both? So basically, a second annual forage crop can be planted once the last interval of the insured growing season starts, and that's the last interval that's available, not necessarily the last interval that you as a producer selected for coverage. Keep in mind the same acreage cannot be planted and insured in growing season with the same index intervals in the same crop year. Once again, there is a nifty chart in our handbook that probably spells what I just told you, spells it out a lot more friendly in a visual chart. So this chart is designed to show you when you plant your first annual forage crop. So the planting month there, the chart shows you when you could plant a second annual forage crop for coverage. So it's pretty nifty. Then you don't have to remember. You can take a picture of this or print it. And your insurance agent should have this information available to you as well. But it makes a lot more sense if you're in growing season 3, the last interval for that growing season, the last 2-month interval starts in April. So as a result, you could actually plant a second crop in April and potentially receive coverage starting in May. And that's basically what this slide is. Just shows you a verbal example. Say a producer plants cereal rye on October the 11th for forage and reports their acres timely. Again, that's very important that you report your acres timely. They report it by November 5th and have coverage. So growing season 3, the last interval starts in April. So as a result, the producer could plant a second annual forage crop in April and would be eligible for coverage, once again, assuming that they reported that crop timely to their agent. Dual use. When I went over intended uses for annual forage, I mentioned this dual use option. This is a unique opportunity for annual forage producers. You can actually receive insurance on the same crop, the same acres, under 2 different policies. It's a unique opportunity. The required combination for this opportunity is to have an annual forage crop with the intended use of grazing, and then a small grains crop policy with the intended use of grain. So these are 2 different policies. Keep in mind, as far as annual forage is concerned, you need to designate that you want to do this when you report the acres. So you're intending to graze the acreage for a while. You're going to pull those livestock off to meet the requirements of the small grains crop policy. Then you can continue on with coverage once you take that crop to grain harvest. It's very important. There's 2 different policies, 2 different set of rules to follow. So it's very important as a producer that you have those discussions with your insurance agent and to make sure you get those reported accurately if you want this dual use option. Now, where can it be done? Basically, the language is located in our special provision statements. So as a producer, you may not know what that means, but your agent does. So it's available in any state and county that have a short rate date for their small grains crop policy. Like I mentioned, it must be elected at acreage reporting date. And keep in mind, with having multiple coverage on the same crop, your annual forage policy, that county-based value is going to be reduced because you're not using the full potential of that crop for forage. You're pulling cattle off early to take that crop onto another intended use, that's for grain. So as a result, we're going to lower that county-based value for your annual forage policy. And by us adding these growing season, it allowed us to expand this potential dual use option to more counties across the contiguous or where the policy is available. So yeah, a lot of decisions. If you keep in mind that, once you make the decisions for the policy, the weather data drives it. So you're not turning in a notice of loss. There's not a loss adjuster that's getting assigned to you, and they're not coming out to quantify that loss. But there's a lot of decisions to make up front with these policies. First thing is to decide, what acres you want to insure. You don't have to insure all of your acres of PRF or annual forage. You also have to identify what imaginary box my land is located in. And if that land crosses over from one grid to another, I may have to decide which grid I want to carry the coverage on if I don't want to carry some of the acres under each grid. So that's a potential decision. Rainfall coverage, it ranges from 70 to 90%. So again, you as a producer decide what percent of precip that you want to cover, your dollars per acre with the productivity factor. Do I want to deviate from that county-based value? Do I need more dollars per acre coverage or less? When is rainfall most important to my particular operation? On my perennial grass or my annual forages, what 2-month intervals do I want to select? And then once I select those 2-month intervals, I may want to allocate coverage amongst them and weight those different. So a lot of decisions, but there are tools. There are tools that we encourage you to communicate with your insurance agent. And they can help with these. RMA has some tools available. Here's a screenshot of our PRF landing page. And if you go under the rainfall index portion of that page, if you go down to the bottom, there's a link that you can click on. It's hard to read that on the screen there, but it's a grid ID locator, decision support tool, and historical indexes. It's a tool that has all of those things included in it. And once you click on it, you can go through the process to help with your decision making for a particular policy. So the first tool is to grid ID. Like I said, these are imaginary boxes. This is assigned a number. So it isn't something you're going to go up, drive around the county and be able to determine what grid your land's in. So with this grid locator tool, it has a place in there that you can put in the address or somewhere close to your land. And then it has underlying aerial imagery. So hopefully you can identify once you get close to the area that your pasture is located in or hayland, then you can click your mouse somewhere within the boundaries of the fence boundary if you want pasture coverage, or if you're within a crop field that you're planting annual forage, click somewhere within that field. Then that gives you a reference point. That reference point then will identify what grid ID that land is located in. It also shows you the latitude, longitude reference point that at some point your agent is going to need to know as well, but they can help with that. Then you tab over and you can see what the historical rainfall data it has been for that particular grid, and it's broken out by intervals. So as producers, we can all remember those really dry years and that kind of stick in our memory. We can also remember last year pretty well. So that gives you an opportunity, since this program isn't going to read your rain gauge that you may or may not have on your farm. It's going to look at NOAA data. So that lets you see, what the historical precipitation data shows. And you can compare it to maybe what happened last year. Maybe you can remember, maybe you wrote down how much rain you received and when you received it. But it lets you see how close it tracks to what actually happened on your land. Then the next tab over is your decision support tool. It lets you put in all of those options, all of those decisions that I mentioned earlier, your coverage level percent, your percent of the county-based value, your interval selections. You can put all that information just like you was signing up for the policy. And then it shows you, once of those decisions, what impacts it would have had on your premium. And then it looks at the historical precip, and it also shows you what the indemnities would have been if you would have had that policy. So it's not going to forecast the future, but it shows you how each decision can impact what that product costs you per acre. And then it also shows you the historical indemnities that you may have received if you would have had the coverage in the past. So that gets me to the next screen, which shows you an email address. So with Rainfall Index products, we do have a team that works on these, and this is our email address. If you've got questions, I think we're going to give you an opportunity to put questions in the chat or the Q&A box. But if you have questions throughout the year, feel free to email us. We do our best to try to get back with you, but this is an email that can reaches all of us on the Rainfall Index team. So it may be a good idea to take note of that and utilize that throughout the calendar year as you have questions. All right, Leah, I think that's what I've got. So I will turn it over to you.
Excellent, thank you. And yes, just a reminder, if there are any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. And I am not seeing anything, so let's continue then.
All right, does that look all right to everybody? Okay. All right, I'm going to cover LRP, LGM, and wean calf risk protection. I'm going to refer to livestock risk protection as LRP, livestock gross margin as LGM, and I'll probably refer to wean calf risk protection as just wean calf. And I'm going to focus today primarily on the cattle side of these programs. We do have dairy and swine aspects as well, but I'm going to focus today primarily on cattle. So for those of you that have been around the programs for a number of years, you would know that prior to 2018, or the passage of the February 2018 Bipartisan Budget Act, all of the livestock products that we offer, so LRP, LGM, DRP, were much smaller than they are today. And that's primarily because there was a $20 million capacity limit on all of those programs that was removed with the passage of the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. And with that passage, it allowed for expansions and improvements in us to do things to increase the participation in those programs. Some of those changes were for LRP fed and feeder cattle. We were able to increase head limits from 2,000 to 25,000 head. We were able to increase subsidies from 0% up to 50% for livestock gross margin and 13% up to 55% for LRP. We expanded the program to all 50 states. And we were able to add coverage for unborn livestock for LRP as long as you owned the mother of those animals. So going into LRP, LRP protects producers against a decline in market price below a producer's selected coverage price. LRP is probably the most simple program that RMA offers, because all you're doing is you are putting in a price floor underneath your calves. That's it. The crop year runs from July 1 to June 30th, and we use CME futures and options prices to determine your offer. Coverage should correspond to the time frame when you're going to normally market and sell those calves. We have daily offers. Those typically come out in the afternoon, sometime 3:30-ish Central Time. They run overnight and then end at 8:25 a.m. Central Time. Word to the wise, don't wait till 8:25 to call your agent. That doesn't end well for anybody. Go ahead, look at those offers in the evening or early morning and get those decisions made earlier the better. So LRP does not cover death loss. However, if you have an animal that does die and you notify the insurance company within 72 hours, you can maintain the coverage on that animal. So we're not going to pay you for the full value of that animal, but if there would have otherwise been an indemnity due on that animal had it been alive, you can maintain that coverage and still get that amount of an indemnity. So premium is due at the end of the endorsement period. So after you've typically sold those calves is when the premium bill comes. And then coverage is available for unborn, like I said, as long as you own the mothers of those calves. And the insured livestock cannot be marketed more than 60 days before the endorsement end date. If you do market them more than 60 days before the end date, you end up owing the premium, but not being eligible for any potential indemnity. So just kind of showing how LRP in general has kind of exploded over the last few years. It looks like in this chart, 2024 is a down year. However, that chart is reflective of about midway through 2024. Is 2024 still ongoing? I fully anticipate 2024 to probably be equal or maybe even slightly greater than 2023. And then, so LRP feeder cattle, we offer coverage for unborn calves, steers, heifers, Brahma, and dairy cattle with 2 weight ranges. What we call weight 1 is 100 to 599 pounds, and weight 2 is 600 to 1,000 pounds. Unborn calves, we only insure in the weight 1 category. So you can't buy coverage for unborn calves in the 600 to 1,000 pound range. Subsidy ranges from 35 to 55% based on the coverage level you select. The higher the coverage level you select, which we go up to almost 100% on LRP, the lower the subsidy is. And the inverse is also true. The lower the coverage level, the higher the subsidy. So we also offer endorsements and a range of defined lengths ranging from 13 to 52 weeks. We'll note that not every day that we have offers do we have all the data to be able to offer some of those longer endorsements. So there are some times that you might not be able to find that 52-week endorsement length. But we try and have them out there as often as we can. Head limits, so you can buy coverage for up to 12,000 head a day and 25,000 head a year. So indemnity is based on if the actual ending value falls below that coverage price, and your actual ending value is determined by the CME feeder cattle reported index. So just to reiterate, your coverage price is based on the CME futures and options price. The ending value is based on the CME feeder cattle reported index. So at no time do we actually use the price that you received for your actual calves. They're all CME prices that we're using. We also have price adjustment factors that apply, and that's just to recognize that, steers, typically beef steers are worth more than dairy calves, and that heavy calves are worth less on a per pound basis than lighter calves. And you can also see in this chart on the price adjustment factor that we do not offer weight 2 unborn. And that chart also can be found in the special provisions for those of you that are interested in looking those up. So let's go through a quick example. Say you're a cow-calf producer, you've got 100 head of spring-bred cows, and you're going to meet with your insurance agent February 15th. These cows are 3rd period, and you're expecting to start calving March 15th. You're going to wean them February 5th or September 15th, and you market them November 15th. So the time frame between February 15th, when you're buying this coverage, and when you intend to market is 39 weeks, which happens to be one of the endorsement links that we offer. Some things you need to consider: how many calves you expect to be born from 100 cows. You don't want to be paying for coverage on calves that don't, like failed abortions, things like that. So what length of endorsement is needed to cover your calves until they're marketed? So like we said, 39 weeks is one of our endorsement periods. What will your calves weigh in November? And what if you sell your calves 60 days before your coverage ends? And like I said, then you end up basically forfeiting your right to an indemnity, but still owing the premium. So what do you actually do? So February 15th, you purchase an endorsement for 85 head of unborn steers and heifers. And again, it's steers and heifers unborn because we don't know what the sex of those calves are going to be. So that is the offer you selected, and you take 39 weeks with an end date of November 15th. We're going to target 580 pounds, which is well within that weight 1 category. And your expected price is that we published was $225.85, and you elected, so the coverage price, the price that, you know, if it falls below you would get an indemnity, is $224.70 per hundredweight, which is basically 99.5% coverage level. So like I said, we get almost to 100% there. So how premium is calculated, you take your 85 head, multiply that by your 5.8 hundredweight, multiply that by your premium per hundredweight, which is $6.12, and you end up with $3,018 in premium due. And then, so what happened at the end of that? You end up marketing 80 head of calves on October 18th of your 85 that were insured. You had 90 calves that were born, but 10 calves died in a snowstorm. You did notify the company within 3 days of those calf death. So you were able to maintain your coverage on those additional 10. You marketed these calves at your local auction barn, and you had an average weight of 560 pounds, which is also well within that weight 1, so you're all good there. So market weight's above your minimum weight for unborn steers and heifers, which is the 100 pounds. And while you did market those calves a month early, that's still within your 60 days, so you are still eligible for your indemnity. This is where we publish actual ending values. Yeah. So if you were to actually look this up, November 15th, the CME reported index was 228.76. And the price adjustment factor for unborn steers and heifers is 1.05. So you just take the 228.76 times the 1.05 to get 240.20 as your actual ending value. And here's where that 228.76 comes from off that that report. So when we go to calculate a potential indemnity, you take your head insured, you take your coverage price minus your actual ending value. And as you see here, the actual ending value is above your coverage price. So there was no price decline, so no indemnity is due. And in this scenario, you still would pay your full premium. But in a hypothetical example of, say, the actual ending value ended up being $200.20 or $200.20 per hundredweight, then you would take your coverage price of $224.70 minus 220, which gives you a deficit of $24.50 per hundredweight per head, and then you'd multiply that by your target weight of 5.8 hundredweight times 85 head to get $12,079, which you would subtract off from that the premium owed, and your check would be for $9,061. Moving into fed cattle, much like feeder cattle, we've had extreme growth over the last few years. And 24, again, we're still midway through the crop year on that, so I fully expect to be at or above 2023 levels. And then much like fed cattle is designed to ensure fat cattle that we expect a quality grade of select or higher, a yield grade of 1 through 3, and a slaughter weight of 1,000 pounds to 1,600 pounds. And then the rest of this page is just like feeder cattle, subsidies 35 to 55% based on your coverage level. Again, with the higher the coverage level, the lower the subsidy. We have the same subsidy links available as we do for feeder cattle of 13 to 52. And you can also, just like feeder cattle, buy coverage for 12,000 head on a day and 25,000 head a year. So the indemnity for fed cattle is based on if the actual ending value falls below the coverage price, and we set the actual ending value by the AMS 5-area weekly weighted average direct slaughter cattle report. And the actual line that we pull from that report is the live basis sales steers over 80% choice category. That is a recent change. We've just modified it from the 35 to 65% choice category, I think last year, just to recognize that the genetics and also the feeding of cattle in the United States, we've improved the quality of the cattle that we're harvesting. So the over 80% choice is more reflective of the cow herd, and also it has a much larger volume of data. So we're able to be more correct and appropriate with that. And then this link down here is if you wanted to access that report, that's where you could do that at. This is the livestock reports page. If you are interested in LRP or LGM, this page is pretty helpful. So on this page, you can go to select which program you're interested in, and then enter in all the details to get down to see what the offers are per day. So like on the screen grab, you can see here 13-week endorsements for steers in New Mexico, in various options here. So you can see what the different coverage prices that you can select, what the premium rate was, and then at the end, if you did take out coverage, you can go back later, and that last column after the insurance has ended will publish that actual ending value, so you can very quickly see if the actual ending value was above or below your coverage price to see if an indemnity would potentially be due. So that kind of wraps up LRP. Moving into LGM real quick, it provides protection against the loss of a gross margin, which is the market value of your livestock or milk in the case of dairy, minus your feed costs. We use CME to establish those margins, and your indemnity is just the difference between the gross margin guarantee and your actual gross margin. Excuse me. Unlike LRP, there are no head limits for LGM. And then if you've been around LGM for any real length of time at all, recently in the last year or two, we changed from monthly sales to now we offer weekly sales. So we publish offers on Thursday afternoons, and then the sales period ends at 8:25 a.m. Central Time the next morning for cattle and swine, or 9 a.m. for dairy. And that's just so dairy can be more similar to the DRP program, Dairy Revenue Protection Program, that we offer, and cattle and swine would mirror more so the livestock risk protection cattle and swine policies we have. For LGM cattle, we're providing protection against the loss of gross margin on cattle. And one thing to note, when we're talking cattle, what we're really talking here is fat cattle. So we're going to insure the market value of the livestock minus feeder cattle. So we're allowing in this program to take into account the cost of purchasing feeder cattle to place into a feedlot type operation. And then for feed costs, we're only looking at the cost of corn, realizing that a lot of producers use other feedstuffs, but because we have to use some type of proxy price, corn is the easiest proxy price for us to use. So that's why corn's used to establish the cost of feed. Subsidies based on $1 deductible that you choose, and those deductibles range from $0 to $150 in $10 increments. That is different than, say, LRP, where you've got a coverage level. This, you've got just $1 deductible. And subsidy ranges from 18% up to 50%. With the higher your deductible, the higher your subsidy. And then we use an 11-month insurance period. That's a rolling insurance period. So, we do offer sales each month, and a producer can purchase coverage once a week, but each month a new month rolls on and a new month rolls off. And you can see that more so in the last slide I have on LGM. So for LGM cattle, we're insuring two types of operations, yearling finishing and calf finishing. And those are just so producers can have options to more closely tailor to what or reflect what they're doing. So with yearling finishing, we're going to assume that they're buying 750-pound calves, with the intention of marketing those calves at 1,250 pounds. And then it takes approximately 50 bushels of corn or the equivalent thereof to get that weight gain. And then on calf finishing, we're going to assume that they're buying a little lighter calf. So 550 pounds calves, they're going to market them at 1,150. And it takes a little more weight difference there. So we're going to assume a 52 bushel of corn for feed stuff in that plan. So you're going to select target marketings in the month in which those cattle will be marketed. And then at the end of the insurance period, you're going to have to submit a marketing report that shows the actual number of cattle that were marketed, and you're going to have to provide sales receipts along with that marketing report. Again, you'll receive an indemnity if the actual total gross margin is less than the gross margin guarantee, but your actual marketings have to be within 75 or at least 75% of the target marketings, or otherwise we're going to proportionally reduce your indemnity, but you will still owe full premium. And then, so when you buy coverage for or take out a coverage on LGM, your agent should be giving you a copy of the commodity exchange endorsement. This chart or visual is in table, that's the word I was looking for, is part of the CEE, and it just kind of shows what prices we're looking at when. So as you can see, if you're buying coverage in January, the insurance period runs February through December. That's the 11-month. If you bought it in February, it's March through January. Then you've got the insurance month, which is when you're planning on marketing those calves, which you can see reflects back to the live cattle price used. And then you can see just when we're looking at these other prices to establish your coverage. So, and here's the livestock web address. If you have questions after this or throughout the year, feel free to send that to us. That goes to myself and a few others that deal with livestock programs. And then we're going to roll into weaned calf. Weaned calf is the brand new program that we're piloting in a handful of states, Nebraska being one of them. So just a quick overview, and I'm going to go in way more detail on weaned calf than I did the other two because they've been around for a number of years, whereas weaned calf is brand new. So weaned calf provides coverage to beef cow-calf producers from a loss of revenue from their calving operation for calves up to weaning age. Unlike LRP or LGM, weaned calf is an APH-based program. So it has a yield component where you can use your own yield history to establish your guarantee. It's going to be much more similar to like a corn or a wheat policy that you might be familiar with in that regard, as well as the plans of insurance, our yield protection, revenue protection, harvest price exclusion. We're offering coverage levels of 50 to 85% with catastrophic coverage also available. You are required to insure all insurable calves. Insurance attaches at the time of submitting a calf report. That's very important, and I'm going to talk about that calf report more later. And then insurance ends at the earlier of. There's several things that qualify for that, but The most common are going to be weaning, selling those calves, or the end of insurance period. And we're currently only insuring spring-born calves. So where is wean calf available? Right now, it's only available in all counties in South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, and Texas. And we're insuring spring-born calves, which we're defining as calves born between February 1 and July 31st. And so what kind of calves are insurable? As you can see on this examples of insurable breeds, we're just looking for your normal, typical beef calves. But technically we're looking for calves that we would expect a feeder cattle grade of medium and large frames and thickness grades of 1s and 2s. And I don't know why that's deciding to roll here. So we're also not insuring dairy breeds, miniature breeds, doubled muscled breeds, or like the more specialty niche breeds. We're just trying to insure your typical beef breed calf. So the wean calf timeline, and I'm going to kind of work through this presentation in a timeline order. So we're going to start here. We've already passed the contract change date. That was just the date that we had to have the policy out and available by. We've also just wrapped up the projected price discovery. And so the price discovery, we're looking at that November CME contract from December 15th to January 15th for projected price. And then we're looking at that same November contract in the month of October for establishing the harvest price. We also have a regional factor, and I'm going to talk about all three of these things here a little more in the next few slides, but a regional factor that just adjusts that futures price to more of a regional price, and that's all based on a 650-pound calf, which is what we've set kind of as the standard to work from. But we do have price adjustment factors, both the projected and harvest, and that's just used to slide those calves' weight from depending on, or because we all know that lighter calves are worth more per pound, heavier calves bring less per pound, and that price adjustment factor just slides to recognize that, because the likelihood of people actually having exactly 650-pound calves is not high. So these AMS pricing regions that we use for kind of the basis portion of this is for Nebraska, they're going to be lumped in with South Dakota and Colorado, as well as Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, and Iowa. And then Texas would use New Mexico, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri, as well as Texas. Regional pricing factors. So this is that basis. We're just going to take the average price for a 650-pound calf in a respected region and divide that by the feeder cattle futures price. And then, let's see here. No, here we go. Here is the formula for calculating the price adjustment factors. And what they do is they create a price slide to adjust on a per pound basis. Because like we said, we all know the odds of having exactly 650-pound calves are slim, and lighter calves are worth more per pound, heavier calves are worth less. And for those of you who are like me and don't want to do the math on this equation, we conveniently publish this factor in our actual aerial information browser for each county under the prices tab. This slide just demonstrates how that price adjustment factor price slide works. So if $2.60 is the projected price for 650 pounders, then the price adjustment factor is 0.0004 cents per pound. Then 200 pounders would be worth $3.06 per pound, and 750 pounders would slide to $2.49 per pound. And then here's the projected price calculations, and in a couple slides I'll show which calculation you use when, depending on the plan of insurance you elect. Some things to initially gain from these slides is that the formulated price is used when you're establishing the production guarantee, and you're going to use the approved yield, whereas the adjusted price is used when calculating the production to count and uses the actual yield. The other thing to notice on this slide is that the adjustment slide has a minimum of, has a minimum of 200 pounds and a maximum of 750 pounds. Okay, and then same story as the projected price. And the next slide will say what to use when, but formulated is used for the guarantees, adjusted is used for calculating the production to count. All right, so this slide shows which calculation from the last two to use when. So if you elect yield protection, you'll use the formulated producer projected price to establish the production guarantee, and the adjusted producer projected price to calculate the production to count. Or if you elect revenue protection, the guarantee will be calculated with the formulated projected price if the projected price is higher than the harvest price, or the formulated harvest price if the harvest price is higher than the projected price, and we'll always use the adjusted harvest price for production account. Or if you elect revenue protection HPE, the guarantee will use the formulated projected price, and the production account will use the adjusted harvest price. So moving down the timeline, the next big item is the sales closing date, which is January 31st, which is very rapidly approaching. And that's the date you have to have met with an agent and bought the policy by. If you want wean calf insurance for 2024, I would highly recommend doing that ASAP. If you're interested in this program, having a conversation with your agent right away. And then, so don't wait until the last day or January 31st. It'll make everybody's life just a little less stressful the earlier you get this done. Why is that? All right, so there we go. All right, so when you sign up for wean calf, you're going to fill out an application, and on this application you're going to list things like the county where you intend to raise calves, and then on this slide you'll see in red, list only one county per application. Do that. This is a pilot and it's first year, and we expect to find errors, and this is one that we have found. Technically, the policy says you can list multiple counties per application. Don't do that. If you do that, there is a chance in some scenarios that you could end up paying more premium than you would otherwise need to. So we have told all the insurance companies, and they've trained their agents, just list one county per application. If you need multiple applications, that's fine. Fill out as many as you need. But only list one county per application. And then so you'll also elect what coverage level you want, the state, your insurable share in the calves, and the plan of insurance you want. We're only offering basic units, so unless you have multiple share arrangements, all of your cattle in the county will be insured together. And then the rest of this slide I'm going to cover in greater detail in the upcoming slides, but you cannot have LRP feeder cattle endorsements for anything except dairy in the 24 crop year. And you'll also complete a pre-acceptance worksheet, often referred to as a PAW, every year, which just includes some basic information about your plan for the year and your operation. So wean calf and livestock risk protection, often called LRP, they have a complicated relationship. You can have an LRP policy, that's fine. But if you've taken out an LRP feeder cattle endorsement for steers weight 1, steers weight 2, heifers weight 1, heifers weight 2, Brahman weight 1, Brahman weight 2, unborn steers and heifers, or unborn Brahman. So basically anything feeder cattle except for dairy, you can't have wean calf. And that's if you bought one of these endorsements after July 1, 2023. So while we recognize you may not have even known in July that weaned calf was a thing, that is still part of the 2024 crop year. So the way these policies work, you can't have both in the same crop year. So you would be unable to buy weaned calf this year. You'd have to wait till 2025. Where these two do play nice together is you can have LRP fed cattle, LRP swine, LRP feeder cattle for a dairy type, or LRP feeder cattle in another state or county and on different calves. Why is this being a pain in the butt? I also want to make note here, wean calf is a continuous policy. So if you were to take out wean calf insurance in 24, you would have a policy in 2025 unless you tell your agent to cancel it before January 31st of 2025. And that would make you ineligible to buy LRP feeder cattle endorsements for any excluded type until you have canceled your wean calf policy. So if you buy it and you end up not liking it, wanting to switch back to LRP, you have to cancel your wean calf policy before January 31st of 25 in order to be able to do that. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. So for every year you have weaned calf insurance, you'll have to fill out what's called a PAW, or pre-acceptance worksheet, by the sales closing date, which is January 31st. And it contains just basic information about your policy, like where you plan to have cattle located, your number of cows, and your plans regarding animal nutrition, animal health, and when you expect to start calving, and then any changes that you are making to your operation from previous years, like changes in implanting calves or creep feeding. I'm also going to go over the pair in the next slide, but just know that some items on the PAW may trigger an insurance company to perform
acceptance inspection report.
and
Also known
why
as the
this
pair,
is doing
is
that.
done by the insurance company, and they must complete it within 30 days.
So
of
I'm
the
just gonna
sales
let
closing date,
this,
which again is January.
can you hear
31st.
this?
To complete the pair, the insurance company must inspect all.
I don't know
cattle
why
in all
this pulled
locations
over
for
an
the cattle
audio
on the
version.
application. This
Yes,
is
we can hear it.
just the insurance company's opportunity to make sure that everything is in place for your operation, to make sure that the calves being insured would have the potential ability to reach their guarantee. A pair is required for all new applicants, which for 2024 is everyone because it's a new policy, so everyone's a new applicant. Also, in future years, if you change insurance companies, when significant changes are made to your operation, if there's been damage to your water or pasture in the prior year, or if you answer no or none to the animal health and nutrition questions on the PAW, or additionally at the discretion of the insurance company.
Okay. So the joys of reusing a PowerPoint, one that I'd recorded, which, by the way, if you want to find the swing calf presentation, we do have that available on our website under the Livestock Roadshow, where you can hear that full presentation. But so records requirements for new insureds, the records that will be required will be your application form, your PAW, the pair that we just talked about, as well as your weaning weight records from the last 4 to 10 years. If you have them and then they're deemed acceptable and they're applicable, for most producers, those will likely be your sales tickets that show the number of head and weight when you sold them after weaning. Moving on to production reporting. For this year, it's going to be March 17th. In a normal year, it's going to be March 15th. That falls on a weekend, so that's why it rolls on to the 17th this year. So when establishing your production guarantee for new insureds, we do have T yields available for those who do not have weaning history. For those that do have applicable and acceptable weaning weight records, those will be used to establish your guarantee. However, for new insureds, those records are capped at 125% of the applicable T yield. And then after the initial year of coverage, those third-party verified records are utilized, and the 125% cap is not applied as long as weaned calf coverage continues. But if you do have a break in continuity, then those records become subject to the cap. Acceptable records must be verifiable They have to include things like the number of head, the weight, and align with the requirements found in Part 4 of the Wean Calf Insurance Standards Handbook and Part 14 of the Crop Insurance Handbook. So also note that you must tell your agent by the production reporting date, which again is normally March 15th, but this year is March 17th, any changes in practices or circumstances that might reduce your expected yield below the yield upon which your insurance guarantee was based. And then the insurance company may reduce your yield based on changes in practices if that's necessary. Here's an example of how that 125% of T yield cap will work. So for this example, we're going to assume that the T yield is 500 pounds, which makes 125% of the T yield 625 pounds. So for crop year 2024, the producer brought in 9 years of records that you'll see there. And then every year that the producer's average calf weight exceeded 625, it was capped at 625. And then the average of those 9 years weights with the caps and the producer's approved yield then is 608 pounds, as you can see at the bottom there. Then in 25, they come back in and their average weight was 670 pounds in 24. And that exceeds the 625 pound cap, but because it was an insured year, that cap is not applicable for that year's production, but remains in effect for the prior years. Then the 10-year average gives them an improved yield of 614 pounds for, and then in 2026, they come back in again, and their average calf weight in 2025 was 582 pounds. So the cap is not applicable, but 2015 falls off their database history because it's based on a rolling 10-year average, giving the producer an approved yield of 610 pounds for 2026. All right, now we'll talk about the calving period, which runs from February 1 to July 31st, and the final calf report. Calf reporting is probably going to be one of the most important parts of your participation in wean calf, and I'd suggest you find an agent you like working with if you have this program, because during calf reporting, you'll likely be in communication with them frequently. Calf reporting begins when you notify your agent of the first calf born during the calving window. So the first calf born on or after February 1, you must notify your agent within 3 days of that calf's birth that calving has begun. The calf report is a summary record of all live calves born at different times from the beginning of calving to the calf reporting date or final calf reporting date. The calf reporting date is the earlier of 60 days after the date calving began for the unit, which again, if you probably only you're going to have one unit per county, or August 1st, which is the final calf reporting date. Insurance attaches only to calves reported on the calf report. So the 3 key takeaways is you have to notify your agent within 3 days of the first calf born after February 1st. And we're going to only insure a maximum of a 60-day calving window, and that calf has to be alive to be added to the calf report, and insurance is not attached to them until they are included on that calf report. And then if you don't have any insurable calves in the county, you must submit a 0 calf report. And then your calf report must include all insurable and uninsurable live calves by type located in the county, the number of cows, an estimated number of calves that may be born after the calf report is filed. That way those calves are considered as uninsurable and not underreported, which would have penalties and would potentially impact an indemnity. The date calving began for each unit, the land ID, share, and signature. And then you may revise the calf report as often as required to report the birth of additional calves until the earlier of the calf reporting date, which again is 60 days after the beginning of calving on the unit, or the final calf reporting date. And I'd highly recommend revising your calf report frequently so that insurance is getting attached to those calves in case they die or some other covered peril happens. And reports can be made in person or by phone and confirmed in writing within 15 days. So one thing that's unique about cattle is that that we had to account for in this program, as opposed to row crop policies, is that cattle can move. If you're going to move your cattle while they're still on the cow to another county in the pilot area, which is South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, or Texas, you must tell your agent and then get permission from the insurance company. Your premium for the calves being moved will be based on the higher of the premium rate for the county listed on the application or the county they're being moved to. If you're moving cattle to a county in a state outside of the pilot area, then it works just like the ones moving within the pilot area. Only we have published a state rate that's used for the other 46 states in the actuarial documents, which will likely be higher than the county they're coming from, and that will apply just to the cattle being moved. If you're shipping cattle to another country, things get different. You have to give notice within 3 days prior to the date that they're being moved, and that allows for things like making sure that the weights can be obtained on those calves and coverage ends on those calves once they're moved. Premium is based on the original county when they're moved to another country, and we have had the question of what happens if you send cattle to Canada or Mexico and then bring them back. Coverage on those calves have already ended when they left, and it does not reattach to them. So let's walk through some scenarios on moving cattle. Let's say you start with 100 head in County A with a 7% premium rate. And then in scenario 1, you move 20 head to County B, which is in the pilot area and has a premium rate of 6%. The receiving county's premium rate is lower than the originating county, so you're going to pay 7% on all 100 head. In scenario 2, you move 20 head to County C, which has a premium rate of 8%, and that's higher than the 7% in County A, so you'd pay a 7% premium rate on 80 head and the 8% on the 20 head that moved. In scenario 3, you move 20 head to an uninsurable state outside the pilot area, and so the actuarial documents list the state's premium rate as 12%, and so you'd pay that County A rate on 80 head and the County D rate of 12% on the 20 head that moved. And then in scenario 4, you're going to ship 20 head, let's say to Canada, and you're going to pay that 7% premium rate for all 100 head, but on the 20 head that moved, coverage ended when they left the country. So if you're going to move cattle, you must provide notice to your agent telling them why you're moving them, where they're coming from, where they're going to, the number of head going, the number of head staying, and when the cattle that are moving will arrive at their new location. Next, we're going to cover weaning and ending of insurance and causes of loss. So the weaning weight report must be completed by you and verified by an acceptable disinterested third party. Weights must be determined within 5 business days after weaning. Third-party verifiers must be present at the time calves are weighed. I'm going to share a list of what constitutes a third-party verifier on an upcoming slide. And scales must meet applicable requirements, which basically they got to be certified scales. A representative sample of the calves must be weighed to determine the total weaning weight of the calves being weaned on each weaning date. So if you wean on multiple dates, you'd have to have multiple representative samples. The minimum sample will be 20% of the calves being weaned, but not to exceed 30 calves. However, while the adjuster or AIP representative does not have to be present at the time of weighing, the adjuster or AIP representative has the final say in the number of calves weighed and other loss adjustment procedures. So say there's a lot of variability in these calves, they can't have the authority to request that all calves be weighed or whatever percentage above that 20% minimum needs to be weighed. So acceptable third-party verifiers are auctions, sale barns, livestock exchanges, AIP loss adjusters. Those are probably going to be the most common. Livestock commission representatives, county extension and natural resource agents, licensed vets, state beef cattle specialists, state departments of ag, animal health, livestock, or measurement and standards division, and state cattlemen's association officials or authorized FSA personnel are also acceptable third-party verifiers. So, say you intend to background your calves for a period of time after weaning and do not have a way of obtaining weaning weights at the time of weaning. We've developed a background adjustment report, and that's when it comes into play. It is completed by you and is used to document calculations and adjusting the average weaning weight of calves that are backgrounded after being weaned, but before obtaining a weaning weight. Information on the background adjustment report is used for the weaning weight report, and sale or weight documentation must be included, and the weight must occur no later than 5 business days of the end of the insurance date, which for crop year 24 is February 7th of 2025. All right, so if you want to walk through the steps, come back, view this presentation later. But simply with the background adjustment report, what we're doing is we're going to take 1.5 pounds per head per day off those calves from the time that they are weaned to the time of obtaining the background weight. So causes of loss: adverse weather, fire, wildlife, earthquake, volcanic eruption, disease but not damage due to insufficient or improper application of disease or controls measures, damage to pastures or other forms of grazing, assuming that acceptable control measures were followed, calf death due to covered peril occurring during the insurance period, which again is after they've attached to the calf report, but before weaning, and then also change in harvest price from the projected price if you have a revenue protection or revenue protection harvest price exclusion plan. We're not going to cover aborted pregnancies, stillborn calves, calves that die before your calf report is submitted, or failed conception. Again, all those, that calf never made it onto the calf report. We're also not going to cover calves that you're required to destroy by order of a government official, authority, and then calves seized or quarantined and are not released during the insurance period, calf death due to any causes while they're under quarantine, or calves that die while in transport. So you're shipping a load to Idaho, they die while on the truck. We're not going to cover those calves. In the event of damage or loss, what are your duties? First, you're going to protect the commodity from further damage by providing sufficient care. And then my advice would be, second, call your agent. But in the event of a calf death, you need to establish that the calf death occurred during the insurance period, that it was due to an insured cause of loss, and you need to provide acceptable documentation of the death with things like pictures. You need to get consent from an insurance company before you destroy any insured calves, put them to another use such as backgrounding, abandon calves, selling of the insured calves prior to the date the calves would normally be weaned, or selling of any of the calves other than through a sale barn or established buyer. So if the neighbor kid wants to buy a few steers for their FFA project, you would need to let your agent know so that they have time to arrange to get weights and provide consent prior to selling those calves. Same thing if like you wanted to sell pairs, we need to get weights on those calves before they actually get sold. Lastly, the premium billing date for the 2024 crop year is February 1 of 2025. That's after you've likely weaned and probably had a chance to market the calves. And then if you don't pay your premium by the premium billing date, which is March 31st, your policy would terminate and it would make you ineligible for purchase of crop insurance. So a quick example here. We're just going to cover revenue protection because it's the most common in this example. So we're going to say you elect revenue protection. You've got a 600-pound approved yield per calf, a 75% coverage level, 450-pound production guarantee per calf. You have 100 reported calves, 100% share and price election. The premium rate is 11 cents. and then 2 calves died to insured causes, leaving you 98 calves alive. And you had 362 pounds of an actual weaning weight with the loss due to insured causes. So when establishing your liability, we're going to take 100 calves times the 450-pound production guarantee times your $1.64 projected price. And we're going to use the formulated producer projected price for that. So $1.64, which gives you a liability of $73,800. Premium would be you just take your liability times the premium rate to get an $8,118 premium. Then moving into an indemnity, you're just going to take, for steps 1 and 2, you just take your liability and then you go through your production account, which is your 98 calves that remained times the 362 actual weight of those calves when you weaned them. And then you're going to use a $1.76, which comes from your adjusted producer harvest price. So these calves weighed less than your projected price, so that's why that price went up. So you have your adjusted producer harvest price of $1.76 to give you a total production account of $62,438. And then so to calculate your indemnity, you're just going to take your guarantee minus your production account, which is 11,362. If you have 100% share, that's what your indemnity amount is, $11,362. We do have a cost estimator tool available on our website. Most agents also have tools where you can look and see like what premium amounts would be, what different coverages would look like, etc. And that tool is available on our website under the tools tab. You'll see a cost estimator button, and you can kind of go through and mock up and see what different insurance options would look like. And then if you need help locating an agent, we also have a tool on the website for that under the tools tab on rma.usda.gov. Under the tools tab at the top of the page, we have an agent locator, and you just enter in things like your location, distance, you're willing to go, etc. And it should populate a list of agents in your area. If you have any questions about Wean Calf or any of the other programs, feel free to email us at this email address. There's several of us that monitor that. And then also this page here listed is our livestock page that has like all the policy documents, etc., for all of the livestock policies I discussed today. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Cody. We have 2 questions on the question and answer box.
Okay.
One says, are those third-party weight verifier aware of this duty? Example, local vet or county extension person?
So they are not required. So no, we haven't sent out anything telling these people that they have to do this, and they don't have to do this. Those people are just options of people that could be used. So they're not mandated to do it. It is just an option. And like I said, I don't think that those will be the common people that are providing these records. Most common records we're going to receive are going to be sale receipts or AIP loss adjusters by far.
Excellent. And there's another question that says, beef on dairy.
So where this program is technically, yes, beef dairy cross calves are insurable. The wean calf program, and that's where I'm going to assume they're talking about, is that question is in the wean calf program. Where this program is not going to probably work for beef on dairy is most dairy operations pull those calves off the cow at a day old or very short, very, very young ages. And by removing them from the mother, that insurance is never going to really cover anything. So they're technically weaned per the definition of weaned calf, of removing them from the mother. So there's not really time to have coverage there for it to work.
Excellent. If there are any other questions, please put them in the Q&A. And there is one more. Regarding LRP feeder calves, why do they almost never publish prices for 52 weeks and almost never below 85% coverage level?
So I can talk on the 52 weeks just a little bit, and the 85% coverage level I would have to double check on. So the methodology for all of that is proprietary, but we have to have sufficient data for each insurance offer. And so if the data is not available, and I mean, we're primarily looking at CME data, I believe, then if that data is not available, then we are unable to publish an offer.
Okay, are there any other questions? It doesn't look like. Okay, are there any other comments or any final remarks?
So I'll give one quick thing that I often get asked on wean calf is covering dead calves. I get questions along the lines of if I have a calf die, how much am I going to get paid? This program does not directly indemnify for a dead calf. It's just that that calf's weight would count as 0 when calculating your production to count. So it would then go into, it just goes into the calculation. So you may not, I mean, there is a, one sec here, that's the wrong thing to drag over. You may not end up having an indemnity, or you might, just depending on the overall weaning weight of all the calves in that unit, which again, if you only have one share arrangement in the county, would be all of those insured calves in that county. So that's one thing to note, is that, you know, it's not, we're giving you a direct payment for a dead calf. It's if a calf dies, that calf counts as 0 in terms of calculating your weaning weights, which could work towards triggering a potential indemnity.
Okay, thank you. We have a few more minutes. If there are any other comments or questions, either by the audience or the panelists.
Leah, this is Colin.
Yes.
I just want to thank everybody for attending. And as I described at the beginning of the presentation, the Topeka Regional Office is the field office that covers Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, and of course, Nebraska. So for questions associated with county offers, you know, things like T-yields, rates, special provisions, things like that, certainly feel free to reach out to us down in Topeka, and we'll be glad to help you out in any way that we can.
Thank you, Colin. If there are no other comments or information to be shared, it seems like we don't have any more questions. Then we would just like to thank you all again for joining today's webinar. Please look for the recording later this afternoon in the archive section of our Center for Agricultural Profitability's webinar page That is cap.unl.edu/webinars. And when you exit Zoom, you should see a short survey. We would really appreciate your quick feedback on today's webinar and ideas for other topics to cover. Thank you again. Have a good afternoon, and special thanks to our panelists. Have a great day, everyone.